Book of Clarence review. This movie was produced and directed by James the Bandit Samuel, who is the brother of singer Seal. It's also produced by Jay-Z, James Lasseter, of whom was the road manager of Will Smith, and he also produced iRobot and Emancipation, which both starred Will Smith. And the other producer on this is Tendo Ngenda, and he also produced the animated film Mulan. The film stars Lakeith Stanfield, R.J. Seiler, Omar Sy, Anna Diop, David Oyelowo, Michael Ward, Tiana Taylor, and Alfre Woodard. It opens with a white homeless man that you would assume is Jesus, or who you might think is the Messiah, and Clarence and Elijah are horse racing with Mary Magdalene trying to win a bet because they owe Jedediah the Terrible some money. Clarence has a twin brother named Thomas that is one of the disciples. He doesn't think very much of Clarence and constantly calls him a nobody because Clarence doesn't believe and have faith. This movie has some present-day undertones, such as Clarence and Elijah riding on a cart and selling weed off the side of it, and they also have a dance-off. I love the costumes and the cloaks. I love the hairstyles being natural, nappy, and it was very believable for the time frame and the actual people of that culture. Clarence wants to get his mom out of the situation that they're in, so he's constantly hustling to do so, which is a theme that you see in a lot of current day situations as far as celebrities and black celebrities. When they come up, they want to get their moms and their parents out of their situations. Clarence thinks that getting baptized will help keep Jedediah the Great off of his back. And that's kind of relevant because people think that just because they say a few words or they go to church or do something superficial, that changes their hearts and that changes their spiritual position. There are Roman centurions that have very similar characteristics of current day police, and they treat the darker skinned people of that time the same. They check their papers, which is reminiscent of chattel slavery, when they checked our papers to make sure that blacks weren't runaways. I found it interesting that when they showed a picture of a suspect in this movie, it was of an Egyptian. Now, this movie to me was subtly saying that the Egyptians were black. And because Clarence and his friends were black, they stereotypically, quote unquote, all look the same, or all black people look the same. And so that's a stereotype that I picked up in this movie. Clarence wants to become the 13th apostle because he sees it as a way to make money. So Clarence is challenged mainly by Judas and some of the other apostles to go and free some of the slaves to prove that he wants to be an apostle, or that he can be an apostle. So he ends up freeing Barabbas, but it still doesn't help him become an apostle. So he decides to become the new Messiah. He goes to visit Mary, the mother of Jesus, to find out how he did all of his quote-unquote tricks. He doesn't believe in the Immaculate Conception, and he doesn't believe in God. Clarence is in love with Jedediah, the Terrible, sister Verenia, and while at a party, they play a pretty modern song. It actually came out in the 70s, and it's called Nights Over Egypt by the Jones Girls. Now, I thought that this was a nice touch and fitting because a lot of the Bible does actually take place in Egypt, and it brought a really modern feel to the movie. When the centurions come to arrest all of these self-proclaimed messiahs, Jedediah actually stands up for Clarence. Another modern day theme that I saw in this movie, when Barabbas was running away, the centurions threw their spears, or they quote unquote shot him in the back as he was running away. During this time, Jedediah the Terrible makes a great speech about how blacks are feared and unconquerable. Pontius Pilate actually does not want to crucify Clarence, but he challenges him to walk on water, and the Most High actually helps Clarence to walk on water. Then Pontius Pilate has to crucify him because he was sent by Rome to actually crucify all of the messiahs. So Clarence got what he wanted because he was pretending to be the Messiah. The Most High actually made him walk on water, and at that point he was convicted of being a Messiah. Particular situation is kind of evident of the fact that if you're pretending to be something, you better be able to stand on it and actually walk in what you are perceiving to be. The real Jesus ends up blessing the white homeless man, and he becomes wealthy and goes and gets a makeover. This was an extremely funny scene because the women in the salon that made him over said he looked exactly like Jesus, having never seen Jesus. And because he was white, they assumed that he was the Messiah. When Clarence and the white homeless man were being crucified, it was interesting that the white man, who people actually, thought was Jesus or think is Jesus in nowadays, he actually damned all the people who were crucifying him. And people think that Jesus is all forgiving and nice and things like that. So I found it interesting that he was actually more of an eye for an eye in damning the people who were crucifying him. In the end, the real Jesus comes and raises Clarence from the dead, and he becomes a believer. The movie ends with Clarence getting another light bulb idea, so who knows what he was thinking and what he did at that point. Now, my takeaways from this movie is in 1 Timothy 5 and 8, anyone who does not provide for their relatives and especially for their own household has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Mark 7, 9 through 13, and he continued, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, honor your mother and your father, and anyone who curses their mother and father shall be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their mother and father is Corban, and Corban means that is which is devoted to God, then you are no longer. Let them do anything for their mother or father. Thus, you nullify the word of God by your tradition, and you have handed down, and you do many things like that. So what this is saying is, in 1 Timothy, it says that you're supposed to provide for your relatives in your own household, or you denied the faith. So basically, Clarence has an issue with his brother Thomas because his brother Thomas left to become a disciple, leaving the mother behind to fend for herself. And this is one of the important things about family that is actually in the Bible that people don't realize. And in Mark is talking about giving Corban or things that are quote unquote devoted to God versus helping your parents. And Jesus is actually speaking against doing that. He said that you're not honoring your mother and father if you're not helping taking care of them, and you rather go and give your goods and your financial means to say that you're doing it for the good of God. But one of the commandments is actually to honor your mother and father. So in actuality, you're actually nullifying the word of God by not doing what it says to do. People were up in arms saying that this film was blasphemous and it made a mockery of Christ, and that it was backed by the Illuminati because Jay-Z was one of the producers. However, I am one that believes that it's going to be hard to get around that, even if that is the case. I'm not saying that it is, because we're surrounded by that. It's everywhere. It's in the logos, it's in the songs, it's in everything we do, everywhere we shop and where we get our goods. And so you're just going to have to draw out the cream of whatever we are given, because it says to be in the world and not of it. So your creator knows that you're here, that you're surrounded by it. Just don't partake in certain things. So in this movie, another takeaway for me was the fact that Clarence isn't much different than a lot of current spiritual leaders, and the fact that they are lying and deceiving people, and some of them are just in it for financial gain. Another takeaway for me is the fact that there is more and can be more than one Christ. Because if you go and look up the definition in Greek, Christ means anointed one. You can have more than one anointed one. and you can have more than one Messiah, so there can be more than one messenger of the Most High. And I think that is also what just Jesus or Yeshua was trying to convey by leaving the disciples, because they were left as messengers to go and find the lost sheep of the tribes of Israel. So after the Messiah left, there were still Messiahs, there was still Christ, there were still fishermen of men. So there's good in everyone, and just because a religious leader or a higher up doesn't think you're up to par, it still doesn't mean that you don't have a part in making the lives of the people around you better. Because even though Clarence was doing what he was doing in a conniving and deceiving way, even throughout that, he was still helping people. He was still trying to help his mother. He actually wanted to free the slaves and freed Barabbas. So he had an extremely good heart. He just went about it in the wrong way that kind of led him into problems. This movie had a lot of blatant comparisons in the struggles of current day black people and the Israelites of that time. Them making the cast black is of great significance, especially in what is going on right now. If you are aware, you are aware. I'm not going to go into that. But if you know the nationality of Jesus and the disciples, then you will catch my drift and know where I'm coming from. I love this movie. It was shot very well. It had a great cast. It made some extremely good points, if you can catch them. It has some stereotypes in there, some things that we need to look at, some comparisons that we need to also look at. And there is learning and educational moments in everything. Even if you don't agree, I know sometimes religious people are very stark and stern about what they want to see and not hear and things like that. And that's important, not to put things in your presence that are going to disturb you. However, sometimes it's not all bad. And sometimes you just have to take out of it the meat of it and see it in a different light. It's important to look at things from a different perspective, because that's how you learn. You never learn if you don't open up your mind. And like I said, I give this movie a 9 out of 10. It was, I think it was very well put together. These are my opinions about this. Tell me what you think or what you thought about the movie. Did you see it? Do you not want to see it? Are you going to see it? And I want to thank you all for watching and listening. And you be blessed and keep an open mind.